on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour. My guest this week is Mark Schweiger, class of 1982, cross country, track, coach, runner, all American, all conference, everything you could think of in the cross country world. And then he has a couple other interesting things that he has done throughout his life. But again, you don't want to hear that from me. That's why you're watching the shows. You want to see the person that is the guest. So without further ado, this is Mark Schweiger. What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour. My guest this week is class of 1982, Mark Schweiger. Mark, thank you very much for being a part of the show.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about everything that we talk about every week. Mark's going to tell us about how he got to Bethany. We're talking about a little bit of cross country. We're going to talk about some academics, maybe a fraternity in there. And then he's going to explain to us this varsity B that I have heard so much about. So let's start with, how did you end up here at Bethany?
Well, it actually started with a recruiting letter from Dave Waddle. And although I'd heard of Bethany, I grew up in Elkins, West Virginia. There was one Elkins student at Bethany at the time, Jeff Severino, who was a teammate of mine on the track team 2 years ahead. So I got the recruiting mail, and I've been recruited by a lot of places, but who would have a chance in Hades of running for an Olympic gold medalist? So I planned a visit and came up and just fell in love with the campus immediately. Went back to Elkins, applied, and then I found out that our guidance counselor and our principal were both Brooke County natives. And they loved Bethany. And so my guidance counselor, Goldie Basil, actually helped me fill out the information, raved Bethany. And so I had some support in high school, had a recruiting opportunity to run for a gold medalist. And then as I started to investigate the school, I'm like, this place is just an awesome place. The faculty, I wasn't a stranger to making the phone calls to find out more information. I had been recruited by Fairmont and Glenville in scholarship, but I just fell in love with it and said, well, I'm going to go to Division III school and focus on my academics and on this being on a fun team with a gold medalist and all those people that he brought in that year. It was a big freshman class.
Well, and that, seems to work out as I'm looking at your at the stats here. And correct me if I'm wrong, but so you were an all conference in cross country, you were an all conference in track and field, all NCAA Division III Southeast regional in cross country, twice a cross country national qualifier, and placed second at the NCAA Southeast regional. Did I cover did I miss anything?
That's enough.
Well, and you are a Bethany Hall of Famer as well.
Yeah. Well, that whole team, I oftentimes look back at that 1980 cross country team as being sort of that was an awesome 80 and 81 had 6 of our 7 varsity runners are now in the Hall of Fame. So I'm just one of it's a storied past for Bethany in cross country. It was just a phenomenal 4 years. I couldn't have chosen a better place to be. With all those guys, and they are my best friends in the world to this day. So not only I call it the paradox of sport, right? So while we're doing it, it seems so important, and at the same time it's insignificant compared to the friendships, the teamwork, camaraderie, just the feeding off of each other's enthusiasm and being friends.
Hey, that's part of it.
So I didn't set that alarm on fire. That was, there were times you let the cat out of the bag earlier, Carlo. I was a Sigma Nu, so we heard a few of those alarms go off over the years.
Once or twice, just once or twice. We will come back to that. Well, let's go to that. So was Greek life something that you saw yourself when you went to college that was going to be a thing, or did it just because of the group that was at Sigma Nu at the time that became?
Yeah, I just think Bethany had a strong Greek foundation. What was interesting about Bethany compared to some of the notes that I had for people like who were going to WVU and some of the other liberal arts schools was the fact that Greek connections were campus wide. And so everyone went to everyone's parties. Everyone tended to be Greek and independent. And so you found yourself in a network of young men, like I surrounded myself with the Sigma Nu House, as being just fun to be around. It was a diversion from all the hard work that was going on in class and from training and all those things, to connect yourself to some guys who are typically pretty crazy, but really to this day, we get together once a year at the Michael DeStasio golf tournament. There are 60, 70 guys over at Ogilvy in June every year. Last year we couldn't, but this year we're going to get back to normal. So it just appealed to me, just like that cross country group did and track team did. It was your network of friends. It was the people who you wanted to associate yourself with. I didn't have any predetermined views about Greek life when I was a senior in high school. I came to Bethany, we toured, we saw the fraternity houses, we saw Greek life in action to a degree, but I didn't have any predetermined notion that I was ever going to be in a fraternity. But I ended up at the Sigma Nu House, and as some of the best times of my life, associating with that group of friends, and then all of my other friends around Bethany. It's been great with Facebook and Twitter and those things to reconnect with some of those folks that we weren't great friends back then, but we found out through just social media that we're really good friends.
Yeah.
As we are now, and maybe weren't back then. So Bethany's one of those places. But my daughter went there, her husband went there. I hope my grandchildren go there and fall in love with it just like I did. So it was a combination of Sigma Nu, track and field, my history classes, and political science classes that made it one big package. That it just was 4 great years.
So you talked about your classes. What was the curriculum like when you were coming through as a student, coming at the end of the 70s and then the early 80s?
Wow, everyone wanted to be a political science major after Watergate. And and it was interesting that I was a history major but took all the poli-sci classes. This was always a loved history as a young man, and then Bethany sort of challenged me. What I found unique wasn't until I left Bethany that what the history and poli-sci classes were to me. I ended up being a department chair at a high school, and as a history major, almost all the other places that the people on my staff went to state schools where they became a social studies teacher. We didn't have a particular discipline. They just studied all of them and got their certification and became a teacher. I was a history major, so I was able to dive deeper into the discipline. And I think it did, all of Bethanians could probably attest to this if they've had to compare themselves to colleagues and those things, isn't to devalue the colleague, but to really give Bethany its credit in that it challenged us through critical thinking. The liberal arts allowed us to be more rounded, better rounded. And then what was really interesting about Bethany wasn't taking the bubbled multiple choice tests, right? You took that maybe in the survey courses, the low courses, the 100s.
Yep.
But when you went through your major, the challenges took place. You had to really articulate
blue books.
Yes, the blue books. And I still to this day, so now I occasionally write articles for a couple of magazines, local magazines, some things like that. I didn't test out of comp. Robin Cole taught me how to write my freshman year at Bethany, and I didn't have a great background in English, but then I ended up writing grants for a living and all kinds of things. But I give Bethany all that credit to have prepared me for a professional world in ways that you couldn't identify unless you went through it, and then you don't really recognize it till you look back.
And then now you're seeing it, and
yes, in a lot of ways, presently working at WVU as a statewide director for a child literacy nutrition program that's just an award-winning program, and relishing that all of this work that's so important and needs to be done. And that comes back to Bethany, that whole idea of executive director, those kind of things. Those were the things that Bethany prepared you for that you would never know until 30 or 40 years later. And you do have to reflect back and believe that that's where it came from.
So now we get to this is the juice that I've been waiting on, because I had Dr. Grimes on, I had Dr. Capel, Ken Morgan, and I keep hearing this, the Varsity B, Varsity B, Varsity B. What was Varsity B, and what was your experience like being a part of it?
It's kind of the Letterman's Club, right? So you letter in some sports and you become you're on the Varsity B. You're sort of, there's no initiation to it. You were a member, and we didn't gather a lot. I think it's probably the predecessor to things like the student activities, SAAC or whatever they call it now, but every campus probably had a varsity club that ended up being something that you could form into something a little more formal these days. But Varsity B was nothing more, maybe a picture in the yearbook.
Picture at the end of the year. And then, so you bring up the yearbooks. What was it like going to, because I don't know if that's something that's a college-wide thing in America, but it definitely seemed to be a very strong tradition here at Bethany that, you had the Harbinger and you had the yearbook.
Yeah. Well, I still have a few of those here at the house, and they're fun. Yeah, it's like anything. I'm running a child literacy program, and I really believe that, like, having that actual book in your hands and moving the pages gives aesthetic value to reading about it. It's not like leafing through a digital yearbook. So in so many ways, the printed press, even though I value it greatly, is kind of being pushed aside for the easy way to publish, right? Digital way. And so I'm always going to be a promoter of books over digital, just simply because it's just great. Now it's sitting in a recliner and leafing the pages and having it fall on my chest to wake me up so I could read it, finish reading it. But no, it's far more aesthetic. But I also think that it has a lot, there's a lot about reading that you get from actual books. Won't get from a digital copy. I do have a Kindle app on my iPad. I still do all that stuff, but there's something about reading a book and picking it up. And I think the yearbook is a good example of that. And so it's fun to look through the old book every once in a while. And so I don't ever go look for the Bethany yearbook on the screen, but I will
have one.
Yeah, because I'll go pick one up, and that's just much more enjoyable and aesthetic for me.
All right, so the last question for this part, there was a building across the street from where I live, and the Sigma News, from everything that I've gathered from them, spent a lot of time. As much as they spent academically, they spent just as much time in that building across the street, Bubba's. Is there any one particular memory that you can pull from being in that building?
Wow. It all runs together. I could give the Bill Clinton answer, like, didn't inhale, but I would say, maybe I was too drunk to remember. So anyway, no, it was always a lot of fun going to Bubba's. Bubba himself was a fixture in that place, and you wouldn't realize how much fun we really had down there. But Bubba was connected to all of us in ways you can't even imagine. I went on to coach later on at Wheeling Jesuit. I started the track and field cross country programs down there, a very storied past down there. It was a great program. I was on the track in 1996, 97, just after we opened the track. And I look up on the hill, and if you're familiar with the Jesuit track, there's a parking lot above the front straightaway. And I look up there, and there's Bubba in that big maroon van watching the track meet. He followed us. And, when you went down to his place, it was like he was such a fixture. I think it all runs together because it was just another night at Bubba's. Of course, Bubba had Bubba's Top 40 as all you could play on a jukebox. It was funny, like when my daughter went there in the early parts of the millennium, that same songs were on that jukebox.
Yeah.
So
You didn't change much.
But we changed the lyrics to those songs a little bit. That was part of the fun of Bubba's. You could just have a good time and sing along, and we had a blast every time we went in there. And I think it was more about Bubba and the atmosphere than it was about any single thing that happened in there. But it was a place to go. In some ways, it bothers me to know that our present students don't have that opportunity. At the same time, the world has changed, and there's an awful lot of challenges that young people have today that we didn't have as much back then. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was on a way from class to home. So it was, so why not? But we stopped off a few times.
once or twice, not.
Yeah, right.
Well, and that building has changed because when you were here, it was just the brick structure. Bubba had not added what I've been told is called the annex or the addition.
Yeah. Yeah, it was elbow room only, and it was so crowded. And we actually had fun because Thursday night was West Lib night. West Lib's a commuter college, so their weekend started on a Thursday night, not Friday.
Yeah.
So Thursday night, the West Lib students came over because they were going home the next day right after class. And so it just was a nonstop. And Bubba had a pretty good grip on that. It was a little bit of a rivalry, some things going on there probably that shouldn't, but he had a good grip on that. And so I think he ran. It was a lot of fun. And, obviously the drinking age was 18 then, it wasn't 21. There were a lot of things that allowed that to happen, but I just don't remember anything really bad happening there. It was just a fun place to be, and credit to Bubba and his wife and Chuck Kern, who took it over a little bit later, to have run that place to benefit the school. I think they did. And
I don't think anybody that's ever stepped foot in that building as a student or as an alumni coming back would disagree with you there.
I will tell you one thing though, one story, and this is later on again in life. So we take our daughter up to homecoming, and she was like 12 years old. We're out at the football field and having fun with the Sigma Nu tent and the athletes tent, the track tent. So we decided to go to Bubba's, and she was really upset with us that, 12 years old, we took her into a bar. So she was upset with us. And then she goes to Bethany.
And then she probably had a good time at Bubba's.
Well, I hope we weren't the reason that she had.
It wasn't lead by example type.
But we love that whole atmosphere, and my family really is attached to Bethany in ways that you can't imagine unless you're attached to it.
So we've come to a really good spot. I think it's a good spot to send it to another fellow alumni, KJ Kieran Dunn with Maple Shades Outdoors. Everything Outdoors. Actually, as we're recording this, I just got a text from him that is today was turkey season for him down in Maryland, and he got one. So maybe I'm getting some turkey jerky or something. I don't know, or he just decided to send me the picture of it. But if you want to follow them on Instagram, it's maple_shade.outdoors. Or the easier road, since you're already watching this show on YouTube, first hit the subscribe button and the like button on the video. Then go up to the search bar and you can type in Maple Shade Outdoors. You don't need the underscore. You don't need a dot. His channel, they're doing a lot of stuff. They show you everything from how to set your tree stand, things about with hunting with a bow and arrow, just outdoors life in general. But we'll be right back. This is Mark Schweiger, class of 1982. I am Carlo Guadagnino, and this is the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour. KJ, take it away.
What's going on, everybody? This is Kieran Dunn, founder of Maple Shade Outdoors. You're currently watching Dingo Talk with my man Carlo. If you're anything like me and you're really enjoying this content, you should like and subscribe his page. While you're on YouTube, you should probably just head over and like and subscribe Maple Shade Outdoors. Check out our page, enjoy some videos, some outdoor content. You might as well hop on Instagram, Facebook, follow us, Maple Shade Outdoors. Now that's enough about me. I'm trying to get back and watch the rest of Dingo Talk, so I'll talk to y'all later.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is the Dingo Talk Alumni Tour. My guest this week is Mark Schweiger, class of 1982. We left off. Mark was telling us about all the good times that happened in Bethany, and I'm sure there's a multitude of more, but what we can fit into the show. We're now at that part. If you've watched any of the shows, you know we're going to talk about that test that connects all of us together as Bethanians, comprehensive exams. So for you as a history major, what was the week leading up to comps like? And then how did comps go?
Well, I like to think of that as like a semester venture because, you have your senior project due, and so you finish that, and then you start looking forward to the comps. Fortunately for me, I'd taken the base of all my courses by January, and really was taking mostly electives and more the teaching track stuff that we're just finishing the degree for education. And so I prepared well ahead of time for that. I figured as a history major, I had to know everything that ever happened in the world, right? that's what everyone says. And then I went to international studies as a master's degree, and I found I know where it happened. So everything. So no, the week leading up, I had fortunately, my work study job was in a media center, which at that time was in the basement of the library.
Okay.
And all those little rooms back there. And so I took boxes of notebooks and books that I figured would be on the comps, and reserved a room down there for 2 weeks and had my boxes down there. And so I got out of the Sigma Nu house, went down there. I spent bulk of my days down there, going 2 weeks in. And, the blue books, we all wrote in those for comps. I think that we were prepared to write better than most places. And so I look back at it as an opportunity to explain some pretty detailed questions to my professors. And they weren't perfect. You knew you made some mistakes along the way. Leading up to comps was nerve wracking, as all Bethanians know. But once I started writing, and I knew 5 of the 6 questions I didn't have any problem with. The 6th one I had a few questions with. I went into the oral exam, and Mr. Young, the history chair, told me that I needed to relax, that I'd passed. They just had a few more questions. So it was from that question 6 that they grilled me. And there were a few other little questions along the way, but I was pretty relaxed in the oral exams because they had let me off the hook going in. So no, it wasn't as nerve wracking as I saw a lot of my classmates going through actually with orals, and they were worried. And of course, we were all in different fields, so everyone had a different experience with it. I had a really good relationship with the history faculty, political science faculty. They were always available. So I never felt uncomfortable with trying to work my way through that way of reasoning in a question that they may have asked me. So they were asking you that for 4 years, those same questions, only maybe not as detailed. And so for me, it wasn't as nerve wracking as, I guess I can say that now looking back. It's coming up on 40 years, and so I guess the mind has a way of blocking out the really terrible things.
And just remembering, like, yeah, I passed, I'm good.
Yeah. So I got really, really drunk that day and don't remember a whole lot about the evening, but other than that, it was really not as eventful for me as it might have been for someone else. So,
Well, is there really any other way to celebrate getting through 4 years, and the real world's coming now? It's not at the door knocking, the door's open, but
Carlo, look at the screen. There's still a little skinny guy in there giving a heck, but the resistance to things like alcohol or anything that was like, my body was so toned to train and run 100-mile weeks that a little taste of alcohol is going to knock you off your feet. So I wasn't a seasoned drinker or anything like that through college, but that day I don't remember a whole lot after dark.
So, so you graduate, and right out of graduation, you're working at Cameron.
Yeah, right.
How
Cameron High
did that come about?
Uh, I love my parents, and thank God I still have them and everything. But I moved home for a month after I graduated in May of 1982, and I guess I moved out as quickly as I could, just because I realized why I moved out to begin with. But we're at that age where you're trying to blaze your own trail. I did it coming to Bethany. Other than Jeff, there were no Elkins kids there at the time, and so it was always felt like blazing the trail was going to be important. I was going to apply to law school, and I always wanted to coach. So, and I know you're going to break the stigma of the social studies coach thing because everyone had those. A teacher at Cameron who had honors English class came up to me about 5 years after I started and said, "I have to apologize." And I said, "Why is that, Sandy?" And she said, "Because I thought you were just going to be another one of those social studies coaches guys." And so I started the honors social studies program there. There wasn't a cross country team, and it was the only year I wasn't on a cross country team from 1975 until 2003. That I was never on a team was the first year at Cameron High School, and I went to the principal and I said, "Can we start a cross country team here?" And he says, "They're going to hurt football," and I'm like, "We can't. They're little skinny guys and girls. They're not going to be on the
They're not
football."
football players.
So we ended up getting a few of those players eventually, but that was just a great time, and I was fortunate. I took an assistant basketball job there, and all that. I played high school basketball and junior high and all that. I didn't aspire to be a basketball coach, but in little schools with 300 students in 6th grades, you do what you have to do, chaperoning dances, all those things that you're going to end up doing in a small school that you wouldn't do normally in a big one. But I landed as the assistant coach for Jim Crutchfield. Jim, you may know who Jim is. Jim's one of my best friends.
Pretty successful time up there at West Liberty.
And now he's at Nova Southeastern. And people don't know this, but he's the winningest coach in all divisions in basketball in NCAA history, right up there with all of them. So, that's what I'm saying. I was always fortunate to be around people who were winning a lot. And so you can't help but absorb some of that. And so I taught at Cameron for 15 years, but in the meantime, it was kind of hard to track me down because I was teaching at the school. I was an assistant track coach at John Marshall High School, coaching cross country at Cameron and basketball. And then in 1990, while I was still at Cameron, I started the cross country program at Wheeling Jesuit and left John. I was the head track coach at John Marshall for a couple of years in interim. So I was on Woodsdale, driving to school every morning to Cameron, going out there. And in the fall, I could coach out there until 1990. In 1990, I had to really race back into Wheeling to coach the cross country team there. In the spring, I was still at John Marshall. So I was teaching coaching in 3 locations at the same time. And so just the way my life was, and working on a master's degree. So, it was a crazy time. I attribute an awful lot of the successes I had to working that little school out in rural Marshall County. And it brought me back there a little later. We built a brand new high school out there, and I was fortunate enough to be on the sustainability team that was going to build it. It's built with LEED principles. It's a great school. If you've not seen it, it's a highly sustainable building, one of the greenest buildings in West Virginia. And so I was able to give back a little bit to that place in ways that now are enhancing the lives of those children to this day. So it made you realize that you had to give back to a little place like that. Those little communities are the lifeblood of the country. And a lot of great years there, coaching with Jim and then running my own programs and that sort of thing. The year I left went to Jesuit, the next year, the girls cross country team at Cameron won the all-class cross-country championship in West Virginia when all the classes ran against each other.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that year, one of my best friends in the world was a cross-country coach at John Marshall. Cameron went first, and John Marshall was second in the same county. So that was a hotbed for distance running in West Virginia at that point. So I never won a state championship at Cameron, but we started something, ended up winning 2 or 3 of them in all classes combined.
Well, and for your coaching career, as I'm looking down at, again, I have a cheat sheet here with the stats on it, but 3-time West Virginia Intercollegiate Athletic Conference Women's Cross Country Coach of the Year, 2-time for the men's in the conference. Let's see. And 2 times you were named NAIA Mid-South Region Coach of the Year. And it says here, your team won 6 WVIAC cross country titles at the time since 1991 and had coached 28 all conference runners and 11 all academic Americans since 1990. Now, you said that number is actually a lot larger with the conference championships because
what happened, I think you're reading the stats off of the Hall of Fame sheet.
That's where I took some of them from.
I was inducted in 96, and the heyday of Wheeling Jesuit was from 96 to 2003 when I resigned. In that span of time, all told, it was 17 awards, but we won 21 conference championships from 90 to 2003. And that math doesn't sound right, but that was men's and women's cross country, men's and women's track. So there were 4 events every year.
Yeah.
45 championships that we coached in, and 21 of them we won, and we were runners up. We never finished lower than 3rd. So our program was really an awesome program in the span that we were there. And I was just exhausted and couldn't do it anymore. It was like I was still teaching all the time and working in statewide programming and all the academic stuff. But it was a great run, and they've still continued to be pretty powerful down there. We did have 3 NCAA champions in track and field, 22 All-Americans, and then it was dozens of academic All-Americans before it was over with. But yeah, we were always in the thick of things. And like I said, the conference is no longer around, WVIAC, but I always joke with Jim. I said, I think in the conference rankings, I had a better winning percentage than you did. So he got all the national accolades, Final Fours, and all that stuff. But we still discuss all those good old days. But it was a heyday there.
So let's talk about I want to talk about the Fulbright Hayes Fellowship that's an award, correct? I mean, it was awarded.
It's a study abroad program that's is funded by the U.S. Department of Education. It has a lot of external missions that fit in, but it's really to actually be working in another country, teaching, observing, contributing. I just happened. This is really probably one of the coolest ones that was probably ever given. And it was given to a team of 12 teachers that went to South Africa the year after the first all race election. So we were in South Africa, all over the country, hundreds of schools, from art schools to farm schools, all different races of people that were finally coming together in some way to celebrate post-colonial Africa. And so very fortunate to have been included in that. It was funny. I just spoke with the project manager for that program called South Africa Today. And I took a survey course at WVU in 1993. It was on Africa and human rights. It was a master's level program. And one of the visiting professors was the dean at Hunter College from New York City, who's now in her 80s, was on the Freedom Rides with Dr. King and all the stuff that went on. And so I was mesmerized just sitting listening to the experiences that she had. Well, she invited me to be on that team. We applied, and then I ended up going with her and a group of teachers from the United States. But we were really the first ones in following the all race elections. Sanctions had been lifted, and they were celebrating. Had all the Paul Simon Graceland posters all over the country, and so there were a lot of really cool things in that visit that And really, I wasn't there a whole year. I only went for the summer months. Fulbrights, a lot of times will immerse themselves in a full year of study. We went as a team, and it was Fulbright funded, Fulbright Hayes funded, and that is part of the U.S. Department of Education. So I would encourage Bethanians, young Bethanians who aspire to be, teachers, professors, to actually go do a Fulbright, go do one of those, and see if you can get some study abroad. And fortunately, was able to give back to Bethany, and then I taught for a couple semesters the adjunct geography classes. So I had a good time with that. And
we
so
missed each other by a year from what your LinkedIn said.
Oh, okay, that's good. Yeah.
So you talked about the school in Cameron that has been rebuilt and is the greenest school in the state.
Well, there are two schools in Marshall County, and while I was in Marshall County, we helped develop a program. I was on a stakeholder committee with the U.S. Department of Ed called the National Green Ribbon Schools Program, and it's like the Blue Ribbon schools, except that you have to practice sustainable practices within your organization, your school, to get that recognition. And so Hilltop Elementary in Marshall County is the first LEED certified school in West Virginia. It was the greenest at the time. Then Cameron was built, and so we used LEED principles there as well, with a lot of new technologies. And so it probably is greener. It didn't get the LEED certification because it was in the throes of administrative change down there, and so they just didn't pay for the plaque. But no, those two schools are flagship schools for West Virginia when it comes to sustainability. And Marshall County schools was one of the first 14 U.S. Department of Education recognized National District Sustainability Award winners. We took great pride in the 10 years from 2002 to 2012 under the leadership of Lloyd Ernest, who was the energy manager, to reduce the operating costs. Marshall County School reduced their CO2 emissions, but they also reduced the amount that they paid for energy and water because of those efficiency practices. And they did it through behavioral practices before we even built those new schools. So Marshall County Schools is a flagship for the nation, literally. It was one of the inaugural winners of that award. So there've been a lot since then. It's been 10 years now that they've had those awards. A half dozen schools in West Virginia I helped write applications for and coach a little bit and do some of those things. So I'm proud of those schools for having done that.
Continued to as well.
Yeah, they are, and they're still doing it. And so we're bringing schools into work with the Green Building Alliance in Pittsburgh and a sustainability culture program. We've had some cohorts meet in the back dining hall at Bethany College for some meetings because we needed a place to eat. And we said that food, when they revamped the cafeteria, it was as good as it gets. And so we started to look at those sustainability pieces. And I have talked with Dr. Rodenberg and many other people on campus about these projects that they may want to do down the road. Those would be just little things that I can contribute back in ways that maybe I could as an alum.
So we've come to the point I finish every show, and you being a Division III athlete, I'm going to start with the first one. If you were talking to a prospective student right now, or a prospective student's parents, why Division III?
I don't think it's ever about that, really. I've coached at the two and three levels, and I just think there's a place for every kid somewhere. I turned down scholarships at NAIA schools to go to Bethany to be at a Division III school, and as a decent student, I got a lot of those scholarships back anyway. And so it's a well endowed college with aspirations to make world changing citizens from their graduates. I think that there's no value. You can't place a value on that kind of quality. And as for the sports stuff, look, cross country and track, there were years when Division II runners were the best ones in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with Division III. If you're a good student and you're getting those scholarships, there are tremendous advantages to going to a Division III school instead of 2 or 1. One thing that I could tell you is that had I gone to Division I schools, I might not have been running in Thanksgiving. I might have been done in October.
Yeah.
At the conference championship meet. And I know at the Division II level, we had athletes who make the Olympic trials. They would have never made a Division I, maybe not out of their conference, but because they had that extra month to prepare for their NCAA championship and to peak them properly, their seasons were extended and they became better than a lot of the Division I. So I just don't think, I think people get caught up on the Division I, II, and III. Maybe it's dads wanting to brag on the golf course about their kid getting a scholarship or whatever the case may be. But I think the real reason to go to school is wrapped up in what Division III schools are, and it does give you a chance to compete at all levels. When I was coaching, we went to Notre Dame. We went to the Division I meets at Pitt and Duquesne and those places. We weren't afraid of that. And I think at Division III, this gives you an opportunity to be fearless, to really go out there and challenge yourself to be better. And there are a lot of good reasons to go to Division III. Mostly places like Bethany really create a situation where you're a man or a woman for others.
Well, and that leads into my last question of the interview is, if you're now, forget the Division III side of it, why Bethany?
Wow, it's the same reason I loved it there. As soon as I set foot there and started to talk to professors and the staff, you walk even to this day. I walk in a cafeteria and the ladies know you from then 40 years ago, and so it's an interesting place in that Larry Hummel was there when I was there. People talked to Larry. Larry talked to the students. Everyone knows everybody there. Mm-hmm. It's like Cheers, right? Everybody knows your name, and it is. It's just a fun place to learn. But what you pull out of a place like that, and it's the paradox again. It's the same with school and with sports. It's not, maybe it isn't the snappy workouts that a coach gives you that makes you a better person. What makes you a better person is what you get from a school like Bethany. You become a better son, daughter, aunt or uncle, husband or wife, friend. All those things you become better at because you've got some experience with it. And you don't always get that everywhere. I just think that Bethany is a great place. It's where I met my wife. It's where my best friends and my lifelong friends were on those teams in that fraternity. And so they're still my friends. And the high school friends they're still there. It's a level of maturity that makes you revisit some of them and wish you had known them as adults instead of as kids.
Yeah.
But lifelong friends are the ones that I met at Bethany, and they always will be.
Well, I want to say one last time, thank you very much for being on the show. This was Mark Schweiger, class of 1982. Why do I do that at the end of every episode?
Thank you, Carlo. Just keep giving me, maybe that little skinny guy will come back on the other part of the screen.
I am Carlo Guadagnino. We have to send it to the Leonardo DiCaprio, George Clooney. I don't know what he's got. James Dean, I think he tried to call himself earlier today. Harry Chambers, he's going to tell us everything about his store. Mark, thank you very much for being on the show. And who knows, maybe I'll see you this summer.
Yeah, let's hope so. Thanks, Carlo.
Thank you. Have a good day.
No doubt. We've had some interesting things happen in Bethany. We had a piece of property to the north of town declared its own private country. Ruth Germain was a famous local figure.
Patricia was the sister was more an activist for that than she was, I think.
Mm-hmm. But the sister was a doctor or something, wasn't she?
She was a doctor, yes.
And,
came back here as apparently retired.
And she was shot, fatally shot on that farm, wasn't she?
Right, she was having, her sister Ruth had a boyfriend who she brought in from Texas, and his name was Desert Owl.
That would be Mr. Owl to those of you who didn't know him.
OWL Owl.
I've never seen it. I've never seen it.
But
in
I think
print.
that's the story behind him, right? Is it was Desert Owl, like the bird.
Right. And one night he came back. She came back to harass him about leaving. She was trying to get him to leave. And he came up on the porch and she shot him he shot her twice. Once, not very fatally wounded, but when she turned her back, she got one in the back.
And that was never prosecuted, was it?
I'm not sure. I think it was tried, but
No.
I'm not sure that he was prosecuted. I don't know.
No guilty conviction.
You've just watched another exciting episode of Dingo Talk, recorded in the secret lair deep in the hills of Bethany, West Virginia. Let me give a shout out to my man Don over at Maple Shade Outdoor. He's got some great stuff going on over there on YouTube and Instagram. Please make sure you check him out. Also, now available as promised, we have the second edition Bethany, West Virginia Mushroom Capital of the World t-shirts and our Chambers General Store. If we don't have it, you don't need it t-shirts. Available in all sizes. So make sure you stop by the store for a t-shirt, breakfast sandwich, or sausage biscuits and gravy, and make sure to check out those daily lunch specials. Now back to you, Dingo.